This is Professor Russell James coming to you from Texas Tech University. Welcome to today's lecture from Visual Plan Giving, an introduction to the law and taxation of charitable gift planning. Welcome to the Secret to Understanding Plan Giving, Part 2, Motivations for Fundraisers. This is Professor Russell James. As described in the previous lecture, plan giving can do two things: lower taxes and trade a gift for income. That's nice, but it doesn't necessarily explain why a fundraiser should know about plan giving. Plan giving has a real impact on nonprofits only when it leads to larger gifts. These larger gifts don't come simply because a gift might be slightly cheaper due to a tax benefit. Instead, they come from two sources: asking for assets instead of cash, and addressing the donor's other financial concerns. For the fundraiser, the simplest approach is to ask for money. Getting the donor to write a check is clean and quick. Beyond sending an appropriate gift receipt, it requires no knowledge of taxes, investments, finance, or law. These gifts of cash are the big red easy button for fundraisers and donors. So why learn all of this planned giving stuff? Because when fundraisers ask for cash, they are asking small. This doesn't mean that a fundraiser can't ask for a big check. It means that when the fundraiser asks for cash, regardless of the size of the request, he or she is asking for money out of the cash bucket. And the cash bucket is the smallest bucket. Significant wealth is not held in cash, it is held in assets. Only a tiny fraction of financial assets, not to mention real estate or tangible personal property, are held in a form that is accessible by simply writing a check. Wealth is held in other forms, and these forms are much less accessible. This lack of access may come from the difficulty in easily selling all or part of the asset, from legal barriers, or from negative tax consequences resulting from a sale. It is certainly easier for the fundraiser to ignore this less accessible wealth and simply concentrate on the 1% of financial assets that are held in cash. Taking the easy route means that the fundraiser will always be asking from the small bucket. Without changing this perspective, neither the fundraiser nor the donor will be focused on the possibility of those truly transformational gifts that inevitably come from non-cash assets. A more obvious way in which planned giving can generate more charitable gifts is by addressing the barriers that prevent donors from making larger gifts. In conversation, this is frequently phrased as, quote, "I wish I could do more, but." Whatever follows this introductory line often reveals the primary barrier preventing the donor from making the desired gift. Most commonly, these barriers to giving relate to other financial obligations. This is where planned giving's power to trade a gift for income becomes especially relevant. The exact nature of the barrier to further giving will vary from donor to donor. Often the barrier will relate to the need for income. For example, the donor may feel pressed to save for retirement. In such cases, a deferred charitable gift annuity or charitable remainder trust may be of interest. A donor indicating the barrier of being on a fixed income may lead to the opportunity to suggest gifting assets in exchange for additional income, thus permitting a gift and addressing the financial limitation. Of course, a fundraiser who is asking only for cash would never think to consider asking for assets, much less asking for assets in a way that generates income for the donor. One of the most common concerns among older donors is the risk of outliving their assets. The charitable gift annuity is a solution directly intended to address this concern by trading a gift for guaranteed lifetime income. Those with substantial wealth may also have limited cash due to the wealth being tied up in a farm or business. Such assets may appear inaccessible to the donor, given the substantial capital gains tax that would be due at their sale. The informed fundraiser can point out the variety of ways in which such assets can be sold without the need to pay capital gains taxes in a charitable transaction that generates income for the donor. Even if the donor is not immediately interested in such a transaction, simply making sure that the donor knows such options are possible before the sale of the business is an important first step. A donor's concern for immediate income may lead him to postpone a gift and instead consider putting a gift in his will. Such a result is perfectly acceptable, but it may also bring up opportunities to discuss converting the gift at death from a revocable gift to an irrevocable one. This conversion not only secures the gift for the charity, but also can generate substantial tax benefits to the donor through methods such as a remainder interest gift in a home or farm, also known as a retained life estate, a charitable remainder trust, or even a charitable gift annuity. For the well-informed fundraiser, the magical phrase beginning with, quote, "I wish I could do more, but," should spark a wide range of possible solutions and suggestions. Getting the opportunity to inform the donor about these can be as simple as asking, "What if there was a way you could do both? Would you like to hear about that?" This simple form of appreciative inquiry identifies when the donor might truly be interested in learning. This also avoids the sense that the fundraiser is aggressively pushing the donor. Instead, the fundraiser is simply serving in the role of an informed advisor, available whenever the donor desires. The lectures in this series will review a wide variety of plan giving methods that involve transfers of assets rather than cash. Before diving into that complexity, let's look at a simple example of how a fundraiser can effectively shift from asking for cash to asking for assets. This doesn't involve trusts, annuities, foundations, or legal documents. Yet it allows the fundraiser to start asking for assets instead of asking for cash in a way that can generate enormous benefit to the donor. Suppose a donor is interested in giving $100,000 of cash. It could be any significant amount, but this is a nice even dollar figure. Of course, most fundraisers will respond to such a possibility by simply encouraging the cash gift and then thanking the donor. But for the fundraiser who understands a little bit of plan giving, this offer opens up the possibility to both benefit the donor and shift the donor's mindset towards the concept of giving assets rather than cash. For the itemizing donor at the top tax rate without other restrictions, the cash gift could create a federal tax benefit of 39.6% of the value of the gift, in this case $39,600. Suppose the donor also holds $100,000 of highly appreciated publicly traded stock. Maybe the donor purchased 10,000 shares at $1 per share and they are now worth $10 per share. This appreciation is great for the donor, but it also carries with it a tax burden. At the moment he sells those shares, the donor will owe a tax bill of 23.8% on every dollar of appreciation. In other words, a sale of the shares will cost the donor 23.8% times $90,000. $90,000 is the amount of increase in value from $10,000 to $100,000, or $21,240. There is no way for the donor to convert this $100,000 in appreciated stock into $100,000 of cash without paying the IRS $21,240. Now, there is. If the donor decides to give the shares of publicly traded stock to the charity and keep the $100,000 in cash, the donor ends up with $100,000 in cash and no tax liability. The charity receives the $100,000 in shares and immediately sells them. Because the charity is a nonprofit organization, it pays no taxes on this sale. After the sale, the charity ends up with the same amount of cash as it would have if it had simply accepted the check. Additionally, the donor is able to keep the $100,000 in cash he was initially going to give to the charity, thus converting the shares to cash without paying any taxes. In this case, the donor is still able to take the full $100,000 income tax deduction for the gift of stock. Thus, the donor gets the double benefit of a tax deduction plus avoidance of the capital gains tax. Although the tax consequences are beneficial, it appears to require the donor to have a simultaneous desire to make a gift and to change his investment portfolio. This is not true. The donor can maintain precisely the same portfolio before and after the transaction. Instead of giving $100,000 of cash, the donor gives $100,000 in appreciated stock and then immediately uses the cash to purchase $100,000 in new shares of the stock. As a result, the donor's investment portfolio doesn't change, except that the new shares were purchased for $100,000 instead of $10,000. This is a fantastic result for the donor because whenever the donor does decide to sell the shares, his capital gain or loss will now be based on this much higher purchase price. If the donor decides later to sell these new shares when the price was still $100,000, he will owe no capital gains taxes. If the donor had kept the original shares and then decided to sell them later when the price was $100,000, he would have owed $21,240 in capital gains taxes. That is the $90,000 of appreciation times the 23.8% tax rate. This charitable swap of gifting shares and purchasing replacement shares can be completed on the same day. There is no rule requiring waiting as with the wash sale rule because these shares are appreciated. The wash sale rule applies only to shares that have gone down in value. The wash sale rule should never be a concern in a charitable transaction because depreciated investments should never be given to charity. Instead, they should be sold in order to get the tax benefit of the loss. After the sale, then the proceeds from the sale can be donated if desired. Some fundraisers may react to this highly beneficial transaction with indifference. If the fundraiser's job is simply to ask for cash, then alerting donors to these hidden tax benefits is just not in their job description. From this perspective, the donor's financial welfare is of no concern to the fundraiser. This cavalier attitude of intentional incompetence is not only bad for the donor, it is also bad for the nonprofit. A fundraiser who wants to encourage large, transformational gifts must shift the donor's perspective from giving cash, that is, giving from the little bucket, to giving assets, that is, giving from the big bucket. On the surface, it may not seem like a tremendous win for the charity to convert a $100,000 cash gift into a $100,000 stock gift. Psychologically, it is a great achievement. Now, whenever the donor prepares to sell a highly appreciated asset, this special tax benefit may arise in his mind. Gifting is no longer associated just with spare cash, but now comes to mind whenever assets are moved. Understanding the tax benefits of gifting, rather than selling appreciated assets, opens up the entire world of sophisticated planned giving. This same technique will be employed repeatedly in various transactions involving charitable remainder trusts and charitable gift annuities, where the donor not only avoids the capital gains tax, but also receives income based on the full untaxed amount of the gifted asset. This world of opportunity starts with an important shift in the donor's mindset from giving cash to giving assets. What about the donor who wants to give to a very small charity that doesn't accept shares of stock? Is this great tax advantage impossible? No. Even if the charity doesn't know how to deal with gifts of stock, the donor can complete this transaction using a donor-advised fund. The donor gifts the shares to a donor-advised fund, such as those operated by various financial institutions, Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab. This transfer to a donor-advised fund creates an immediate income tax deduction. The donor then directs the donor-advised fund to sell the shares and write a check to the charity. The charity receives only the cash and never has to deal with the securities, but the donor still receives the tax benefit. The rest of the transaction can occur as before, with the donor using the cash he would have gifted to the charity to purchase replacement shares of the stock. This has been The Secret to Understanding Plan Giving, Part 2, Motivations for Fundraisers. Join us next time for The Secret to Understanding Plan Giving, Part 3, Motivations for Financial Advisors.